Soldiers guard the residence of Mali's President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta in the capital, Bamako. He and Prime Minister Boubou Sese were detained here on Tuesday. As rumours of a coup spread, President Keïta appeared on state television announcing his resignation. West African bloc ECOWAS responded forcefully to the coup, isolating Mali through border closures, suspending financial flows, and called for sanctions against coup organisers and their supporters. Many Malians welcomed the coup. Crowds frustrated with the president and his government spurred the soldiers on. Some ransacked and burned government offices. The soldiers began their mutiny at a base on the outskirts of Bamako, the same base that saw a 2012 army uprising that opened the way to Keïta's presidency. Heavily armed troops were later seen escorting a vehicle believed to be carrying the president.
Huawei, the world's leading manufacturer of 5G network gear. A U.S. campaign seeks to have allies around the world dump the supplier for security reasons. Europe has become the focal point of that campaign, and in particular, Germany.
In the high-tech city of Shenzhen, where Huawei is headquartered, 5G is already a reality. Chinese state television runs footage of transmission masts under construction. Huawei has become the world's largest network gear supplier and was planning to supply its kit for 5G networks around the world. But the US has banned its companies from doing business with Huawei, much to the annoyance of officials in Beijing. Washington is calling on the world to make a decision against China. Last week, US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo toured Europe and called for Huawei to be banned from 5G networks because of espionage fears.
Yes, Ariel, the big question here is how much does Israel worry about the UAE's agenda the day after this agreement between Israel and the UAE is signed? Israel has a tradition, a principle leading its security policy to hold some sort of a superiority when it comes to military power, and especially when it comes to being the strongest air force in the region, in the Middle East. Now, it seems like with more details leaking from this deal, that there is some part of the deal in which Israel gives Washington a consent to sell these F-35 aircraft to other countries, and specifically this time the UAE. From the UAE part, the interest is obvious. They want to improve their military force and to gain this military superiority here in the region. Israel will probably not give a consent for this, but it's already in discussion.
Authorities in Mauritius have arrested the Indian captain of the Japanese ship which ran aground on a coral reef and spilled nearly 1,000 tons of oil on the Indian Ocean Islands' protected coastline. Sunil Kumar Nandeshwar, who has been charged with endangering safe navigation, is now in police custody. And he is now pending a bail hearing next week. The carrier's first officer has also been detained. The arrest comes 3 weeks after the Japanese ship MV Wakashio ran aground off the coast of Mauritius. The ship, which has split into two since then, has spilled more than 1,000 tons of fuel in the island's most pristine coastal areas. Mauritius is now racing against time to contain the spill, which has prompted an environmental emergency.
No one likes to be stuck on the tarmac, and with everyone skittish these days about COVID-19, it's even more stressful. Well, that's what happened when passengers on an American Airlines flight found themselves trapped for 7 hours.
We are now over 6 hours on the plane.
Passengers took to social media to vent their frustrations.
It's been a very, very long ordeal, to say the least.
Their American Airlines flight from Las Vegas to Dallas was diverted to San Antonio because of bad weather. And then the nightmare began.
This ain't right. We got people's lives in the balance here.
Stranded on the tarmac, the hot, hungry, and thirsty passengers stood in the aisle. Most wore masks, but some did not.
Ja, ist okay. Sammelführer 34 mitgehört?
A U-turn after an uproar over accusations of attempting to sway the 2020 election. The US Post Office has reversed controversial changes which these protesters in Atlanta say would hinder postal voting. There has been fierce debate over postal funding in the United States, with record numbers of Americans expected to vote by mail due to COVID-19. In recent months, the US Postal Service had started what it called cost-cutting measures, including removing mailboxes, cancelling delivery runs and closing down sorting centres. But in a statement, US Postmaster General Louis DeJoy said the changes have been suspended until after the November election to avoid even the appearance of any impact on election mail.
Let's now get to the latest from Sri Lanka, where the government has said that electricity would be rationed across the island nation after the Chinese-built Norak Chalai coal power generator shut down. This shutdown led to an almost 12-hour-long nationwide blackout. Sri Lanka's electricity board has now said that the power will be cut for 3 hours every day across the country to conserve electricity. The nation was left with no power for up to 11 hours due to a technical fault at a thermal power plant near the capital, Colombo. A spokesperson from the country's electricity board has now said that a coal power plant takes a few days to restart. The 900-megawatt Chinese-built power plant, which provides almost one-third of Sri Lanka's electricity, faced an unspecified failure and tripped. The disruption is the worst since March 2016, when the whole country was without any electricity.